Good morning. My name is Dr. John Hulsman, and welcome to my latest vlog for España. Thank you so much for so many of you who've made this part of your life, and we will continue to keep them coming. Today we're going to talk about one of the most important strategic developments of the last decade, AUKUS, the new submarine deal between Australia, the UK, and the US, whereby the Australians went to the UK, who then went to the US and said, rather than having a $90 billion contract with the French for diesel-powered submarines, let's buy the real stuff. Let's buy nuclear-powered submarines, which are almost undetectable and have a much longer reach into the endless Indo-Pacific, and let's buy the top-of-the-line stuff from our allies, the US and the UK, and abrogate the deal with the poor French. Well, it's easy to be unkind to the French, let's be honest, and they're throwing the crockery around as though they were a jilted lover after losing out on the deal. Is on one level very silly, but on another level rather profound. Yes, the French are forgetting conveniently that there were cost overruns and they were behind schedule, as Figaro has made clear. But the French, who were born to be offended in many ways, are actually onto something. Because of their geostrategic history, they understand something instinctively about geostrategy. This is Australia confronted with the number one threat to its existence existentially, the rise of a bullying expansionist China in the Indo-Pacific, and saying, no, we'd rather not work with the French and the EU when push comes to shove. We would much rather work with the Anglosphere, the US, the UK, Canada, New Zealand, the dominions of the former British Empire. And the French see this rightly as a snub to the EU, that the EU isn't what it thought it was, which is the instinctively go-to partner of pretty much everybody. We've been told this at conferences, lied to about it at conferences for a long time, and this is a slap in the face, and I would say long overdue. Because the problem with EU conferences is they're filled with EU cheerleaders who don't look at actually the EU in anything other than a quasi-religious way. And I'll give you an example. At many of these conferences, people don't even think the Anglosphere exists. It's not even a thing. It hasn't even been talked about. 20 years ago, I helped come up with the term Anglosphere, and immediately people in the EU said, this is just a reactionary white guy's reaction, a Churchill tribute club. They read old speeches. It's a nostalgic view of the world run by the Anglo-Americans from World War II and means nothing else. Well, this always struck me as wishful thinking, the worst kind of analysis. And there are three basic ways the Anglosphere is real. First of all, foreign direct investment, FDI. Which is the name of the game in globalization. And on this front, the UK's largest FDI partner is the United States and vice versa. They invest in each other because of all the commonalities. And this is the future, not the past. This is geoeconomics. And this was conveniently overlooked by EU cheerleaders. Second point is strategic and profound. Think of this. Australia, New Zealand, Canada, the United States, and the UK, like Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid, may bicker, may fight, but they come out shooting the Bolivian army together. In the three world wars of the 20th century, World Wars I, World War II, and the Cold War, all of them on each war was on the same side. That's a remarkable record of strategic constancy that we don't have with our European partners, for instance. A remarkable record of strategic constancy. 15 separate occasions they could have been on one side or the other, and the Anglosphere plus the United States in each case, like Butch and Sundance, come out shooting together. This struck me as real, tested empirically, historically. And then third, there's an institutional expression for the Anglosphere, the Five Eyes Intelligence Consortium, the largest intelligence sharing group in the world. Every week, the US, the UK, Canada, Australia, and New Zealand share signals intelligence. Like little kids with baseball cards, they put the cards down and say, this is what we got, what do you have? We don't do this with any other, the United States doesn't do this with any other ally in the world. And we do this because we innately trust each other. Once you share intelligence, you can't unshare intelligence, meaning these are the bedrock alliances that one has. And we do this uniquely with the Anglosphere. In other words, if we look at things strategically, if we look at things geoeconomically, or if we look at in terms of intelligence sharing around the world, the Anglosphere is not a Churchill tribute band. It's the future. But no one at an EU conference ever wanted to admit this, because to admit this would mean the EU is not the go-to partner in every case of the United States. It would mean the transatlantic alliance is divided, more thought of as being divided into three. The EU, the United States, and the Anglosphere. Well, the EU didn't want to share the glory, didn't want to even acknowledge this existed, until AUKUS came along, where in typical Anglosphere fashion, Australia talked to the British, who talked to the Americans, who agreed to the nuclear sub-deal, but more importantly, to also work in the future on AI issues, on cyber issues. This is a defense pact. It is not just about submarines. It is an old-fashioned defense pact, and of course it's done between the three Anglosphere countries that share a common language, that share a common history, that share a common democratic view. It's not that the EU is not democratic, but the emphasis on individual liberties is much more of an Anglosphere thing. Likewise in capitalism, it's not that the EU isn't capitalistic, but the Anglosphere countries tend to have a capitalism which is more unfettered, which has more rich people, more poor people, more income disparity, less control, less government involvement, less corporatism. Yes, they're both democratic and capitalistic, but that obscures the commonalities that the Anglosphere has that the EU simply doesn't. It's little wonder that given all these things in common, plus the great glory of speaking the common language of English, that this is a great advantage. As de Gaulle himself said, the Americans have two great advantages, the dollar and English. And this is a huge advantage amongst the Anglosphere. We understand the nuance of what each other are saying. So there are three pieces of the West. Well, this is a great shock to everyone who's ever been to an EU conference who just heard this is some reactionary Churchill club rather than the future. Australia, when forced to choose, chose the Anglosphere, and that's what's driving the French crazy. So what should the EU do? Well, not sulk and throw the crockery. That would be my first comment. Rather than limiting free trade deals, as France is threatening to do between the EU and Australia as punishment for the Australians not going along with the French. I mean, this is juvenile. Europe needs to have a long, hard look at what it can do and do well. Too often at these conferences, if things fail, we're told that in failing, the EU will now get its act together, that failure will be the impetus to integration. If things succeed, we're told, well, this just proves the EU is going to rule the world someday. This is terrible logic. This is wish fulfillment of the worst sort. The EU needs to look at itself squarely in the mirror, and a lot of people look at the EU and say, militarily impotent, economically sclerotic, and politically divided. It is a great power, no one's doubting that, but the least of the great powers. I think that's true, and I think that rather than sulk in their tent, the EU now must say, if we fail, it doesn't innately mean we will be successful, but now this is the last chance saloon, and we need to be successful. Here are three things the EU can do. First, stop sulking again about free trade deals and cut more of them. The EU has one of the great internal markets in the world, depending on how you count it. Either NAFTA or the EU has the largest internal market in the world. This is a huge magnetic draw to the rest of the world. Given the protectionism in America, the terrible protectionism of the Biden administration, of Trump's Republicans, this is a competitive advantage Europe has. It should be cutting free trade deals with everybody in the Indo-Pacific, which we all agree is the future of the world. Not fewer free trade deals, more of them, because the EU's market makes it a magnet, and this geoeconomic tool can be used to move the EU up the great power rung. Secondly, stop talking about having a military, and either have one or not. It can't just be the French who can do everything from high spectrum to peacekeeping, but the Germans, the Italians, the Spanish have to play. Because if you don't have an army, nobody cares about what you have to say. The world is not a debating society. If you have an army, you're listened to. If you don't, you're not. It's time to decide. And third, the EU has to have common direction. Right now we have German neutralist mercantilism, French Gaullism, and Atlanticism in Italy, Eastern Europe, and Northern Europe. A whole lot of nothing is what this amounts to. The EU needs political direction over the Indo-Pacific, the most important region in the world, where all the risk and all the reward are. If the EU can do these things and use this shock to move forward, then all is well. But as Australia has shown, doing nothing means the EU will be simply passed by history. Now is the real wake-up call. The Anglosphere has done the EU a favor. It's a real thing. It's been chosen to balance against the Chinese in the Indo-Pacific. Now it's the EU's turn. Thank you very much.